Hello and welcome to the second video in my exam practice series, specifically working on the conflict and tension unit, which means I'm talking about question 2. This, in my opinion, is the hardest question on the conflict and tension paper. So today it's going to be me really trying to make sure you understand what is expected of you, as well as how we demonstrate both our understandings, but also kind of our ability to connect our own knowledge to prove source usefulness. Now, I do need to start with a little bit of a reminder. That reminder being that before you attempt exam practice, before we are practicing for an exam, we need to be really, really confident on our content, right? You do need to know your topics in depth before we get involved in questions. The questions have a limited mark. We're going to look at a mark scheme later. We've got a very specific point where you need some historical knowledge. And if you do not have that knowledge, you will be stuck behind. You'll be capped at a certain amount of marks and capped at a certain grade. You need to be revising all your content regularly. I mean that as in every few days, once a week, depending on how far away you are from the exam, you need to be looking things up on your own. Lots of things will be happening at school with your teachers. They will be trying to make you revise, but if you aren't doing it on your own, you're not going to be doing enough. Knowledge, as well as that though, is 50% of the battle. It is not the entire story, is you knowing your facts. Exam practice is the other 50%, our ability to demonstrate skills. So let's have a look at this question first so we actually understand what's being asked of us. The question for question 2 will always have a stem that looks like this. Study sources B and C in the source booklet. So there'll be a separate page with two sources on it, B and C. How useful are sources B and C to historians studying blank? That blank could be the Treaty of Versailles. That blank could be the failures of the League of Nations. That blank could be the Rhineland remilitarization. It could be a massive number of different items, but it doesn't really matter. As long as you know your content, we are assessing source utility. How useful are these sources? What do they tell us about a particular topic? I will let you know now that there are no non-useful sources. Every single source will be giving you something useful. They will be telling you a particular opinion. They will be giving you more ideas or more perspectives on a certain event or story. And you need to be the one that identifies and recognizes that usefulness. People who say it's not useful don't earn top marks in this question because that means you ignore lots of what the source does tell you about the topic. Now, you'll notice that it says source B and C, which is the reason why this question is 12 marks. You have to look at two different sources next to each other. You are looking at going, right, what's useful about this one and what's useful about this one? How do they relate to this topic? And finally, as well, you need to judge which one is more useful. There is no right answer to that question. Usually it might be based on how many people's opinions are expressed or how relevant you feel it is to the topic. But as long as you're capable of providing a valid and backed up argument to that factor, you should be able to get top marks in this question. Today we'll be practicing all of these skills. There will be model answers at the end. There will be example answers we'll use, and we'll even have a moment with a question at the end for you to have a go at your own. We will really want to practice and make you understand what we're doing before we do anything else. So let's think about how we should approach this question. I don't want to be shoving sentence starters on my screen because sentence starters are a scaffold. They're to help you set your answer up. But if we think of a scheme or a process to answering a question, I think it should come in 3 steps. Step 1 should be all about looking at that question. Look at the question topic. What do I know about that question topic? If it's about reactions to the Treaty of Versailles, what do I know about reactions? How did Germany, France, Britain, USA react to it? Did the USA like it or not? Did Britain like it or not? This knowledge is the relevant knowledge that you want to bring into your answer, which is why you've been revising, which is why you've been using all of the access on Teams as well, right? You need to be looking this up so that you can have the process to understand these sources as well as add on to them. Once we've got a good grasp of what the question is, if you can see the example at the bottom has changed to remilitarization of the Rhineland, for example, we now look at both the sources. What information is useful in source A and B? What is in those sources, right? What message are they telling us? And let me actually give you a few things we can look at. Just like in question 1, we can look at the provenance. Who has made that? Whose opinion does this source kind of give across? Is it the British public? Is it a particular politician? What am I gaining from that? Looking at the content of the source, what's the message being put forward? Is it telling us that Britain likes this, or the USA dislikes this, or that this specific person is making an argument here? Are they encouraging or dissuading a certain opinion here? Can we identify and understand that? You could look at the time and see what's going on at this particular time, as in if it was happening at the time of the remilitarization in 1936, then it's probably going to be a reaction to it. But if it's happening much later, it's probably something that's a bit more feeding back and, should we say, thinking about the long-term consequences of the Rhineland. And even the message, like I said earlier, what is it trying to make people do? And lastly, we think about the relevance to the topic. What elements of this, in this case, the remilitarization of the Rhineland, is it talking about? What is it mentioning and making reference to? Is it telling us why they remilitarized the Rhineland? Is it telling us how they remilitarized the Rhineland? Is it telling us about the consequences of that event? We want to link and we want to think and we want to analyze all of this. And when you looked at this, you've got 5 different things that you could talk about in a paragraph. So you'd want to use these kinds of ideas to make sure you've got a firm grasp of what is useful. You only want to focus on positive contributions in this question, avoid negative ones. If it's telling me something, I want to say, look, it's useful because it tells me that, and it could be from any of those. And then finally, my last step would be, after I've analysed both sources, I've said what both of them provide, I'm going to go, right, which of these is more useful? I'll think about a variety of different reasons, like, is it giving me more than one person's opinion? Is it giving me a wider scope? Is it giving me a more relevant opinion to the topic? There isn't a right or wrong answer, but what you need to do in your conclusions is you need to follow a structure where you talk about both sides of the argument, not just yours, but an opposing side, and that you criticize it as well. So if you want to get your opinion across, in my opinion, source B is more useful to studying the remilitarization of the Rhineland. This is because it presents a wider scope of opinion compared to source C. So others will argue that source C is better for the reason that it's more relevant to the topic of Rhineland because it shows me how they remilitarized it. This argument is limited because this is not as strong an argument, because when we're trying to understand reactions or we're trying to understand the remilitarization, I think that ideas of how people see it links closer to this topic and this topic, right? My argument is going to show both sides, and I'm going to demonstrate why mine is more effective, why mine is better, and why other arguments are weaker. The structure for this question should be a paragraph on B, a paragraph on C, and a concluding judgment paragraph that says this exact format I've just shown you for step 3. These steps make sure you talk about and think about the right things to get this answer and get these 12 marks. Now, what exactly is being asked of you for 12 marks? Here is the mark scheme. Now, often I don't ask students to look at the mark scheme in too much detail. What I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify it down so you understand what's necessary to achieve these levels. Level 1 is the first step of the mark scheme. It says basic analysis. You need to show understanding for one or both sources. So when you write an answer, you're trying to demonstrate that you understand those sources. This source is saying it's useful because it gives us this opinion, right? You need to know your stuff and to think about what the source is saying to you. What is it providing about that question topic? If you don't do that, you don't achieve level 1. Level 2 is slightly different. It is a simple evaluation of the sources based on content or provenance. What this is that you now not only demonstrate that you understand the source at hand, but that you relating it to the question topic. This is useful because it tells me this about the remilitarization of the Rhineland. It's useful because it tells me this about what it gives me this opinion, or it lets me know how these people felt. If you can understand what one of them is useful for a particular reason, remember those positive contributions, you're in level 2, 4 to 6 marks. Be aware, level 1 and level 2 are not for anything more than one source. So you can get 6 marks out of 12 by only analysing one of the 2 sources with nothing else provided. To get level 3 though, there is a big jump in expectations. A developed evaluation of sources based off content and or provenance. So this has not changed really much in terms of what's expected of you, but if you see it's extended reasons for the utility, so you're giving me more of an understanding of why they're useful, but if you notice it is sources, not source, but it's both sources. You need historical knowledge to back these up, if you see, are supported by own knowledge now, but you need to also analyze both. So you could get 6 marks with 1 paragraph on source B alone, but you could get 9 for having 2 paragraphs on source B and source C. Level 4, pardon, is the final one, a complex evaluation of both sources with sustained judgment based on content and provenance. So you're looking inside the source and thinking about the purpose of the person who's making it. With that, using that purpose, we think about and judge which one's better. This would be mostly from your final paragraph, your judgment paragraph, but it would also be definitely coming from you thinking about who has made the source as well. So notice that the 9 marks, you'd only talk about what you see in the pictures or in the writing, but to get top level, you need to also think about, right, who has made this? What's that opinion? How is it useful for me to understand the opinion of that person? This is a page you could look at for a very long time and not really grasp. But if we are trying to come up with those skills, I want to show you what those skills look like. I want to show you what I mean when I say you're demonstrating understanding, you're relating it to the topic. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at some examples now, some examples that I've written to try and prove it. So I've come up with an example question. How useful are sources B and C to someone studying Cedar Mount Academy? Now, unfortunately, my head has covered up one of the sources, but let's look at them both so you understand what I'm asking. Source B, photo from a CMA website 2019. We've got a photo of all these students looking smiley, wearing PE equipment. And source C is a quote taken from a parent of a child who was sent CMA. And I know you can't read it, which is really unfortunate, but it says, the school is so vibrant, diverse and inclusive. It's clear the students love it. They study a curriculum that really makes them global citizens, okay? What level 1 does, and you can see on the left-hand side, we are demonstrating understanding of at least one source. I'm going to demonstrate understanding of both just so you get a gist, but to get level 1, it would be a statement that looks something like this. Source B shows us that CMA has a PE department and it's attended by very many students, right? I understand the message being given across by the source. I understand what's being put in front of me. Source C is saying that Cedar Mount's very diverse and the students are happier because of it. Right, I am not saying anything about relation to the question about what I learn about Cedar Mount Academy. I'm just demonstrating understanding of what the sources tell me. I'm not copying the source down. I'm not saying what I see. I am summarizing what the sources mean. Let's look at question level 2 then. If we were to change these answers and make them better, how would we make them level 2? Now, level 2 says we need to talk about source utility to the given topic, right? So we've demonstrated we understand them, but we need to bring them back to Cedar Mount Academy. So let's try and do that by adding one sentence more. So source B shows CMA as that PE department's attended by many students. It's useful because it shows us that students are keen to get involved in local competitions as well as enjoy them. I'm adding my understanding of why it's relevant to do that. I'm thinking about the positive contributions I gain from that source. Source C says it's diverse and students are happier. This is useful because it tells us the parents view the academy and its diverse curriculum, and it tells us that they view it in a positive light. I am identifying that provenance. What am I gaining about the reaction and feeling from these two sources? That's level 2. That's 4 to 6 marks. I'm trying to demonstrate and connect them to my question topic. Now we need to go to level 3. Some of you might immediately go, we're already at level 3. We've done both sources. We need historical proof though. We need to add something from ourselves. So level 3 is historical knowledge needs to be added. So I'm going to add further sentences to expand on what I've said already. So I've added it in the bold here. It's the exact same sentences, but even though we're talking about local competitions, we add that this is organised by teachers such as Mrs. Rooney and Mrs. Bowker to ensure students compete across Gorton. What that does is it adds my own knowledge. It proves that I know this topic in depth. I understand why this would be useful to a historian because I, as a historian myself, know what's going on. And the same thing goes down about the school diverse curriculum in the positive light. It refers to the school making a dedication to a decolonized curriculum in 2019. That meant all subjects made an effort to change the way they teach to be more diverse to match the student community. You can see that I'm adding something from myself to the sources now. I am expanding and using the sources to springboard off into my own knowledge. That is what's expected to get level 3 in this question. Level 4, I couldn't fit on the page. My screen's getting very full up with words, you might notice, but basically a level 4 answer gets that final judgment paragraph. We are trying to judge using content and provenance. We've used a little bit of provenance so far, but let's make sure we demonstrate that with a final paragraph. So I'll remove the old ones, and we'll move to level 4. So let's read it just calmly together. Overall, I feel that Source C is more useful to someone studying at Cedar Mount Academy as it's a reflection of the Academy that does not come from the Academy itself. I've identified my reason. It's because Source C was created by a parent who's speaking of their own free will and therefore is actually impressed with the decolonized curriculum. I've done, in my opinion, this is because. Now let's do the opposite argument. Source B in comparison makes a good display of the PE department, however it comes from CMA itself and therefore might be only presenting positive elements of the department in an effort to advertise itself. I'm not only saying what's good, why someone might think it's strong, but it is also got weaknesses. I'm pointing them out to improve my own argument. This answer would be a level 4. It would hit 10, 11, 12 marks. I'm not saying it would be 12 marks because 12 marks is kind of hard to achieve in a made up question, but you get the gist, hopefully. This level 1, 2, 3, and 4 is what we need to expand upwards from. That step kind of process to how we approach each question is something we need to practice. So let's practice it. On my screen is a model answer. What I'm going to ask you to do is to pause the video and have a think about the model answer, and then what I want you to do is to attempt it, and then when you've attempted it I want to pause and come back because I will go through the question out loud and have a think about how I would approach and think and answer this question. Okay, pause the video now, read the question. It is, how useful are source B and C to someone studying the Treaty of Versailles? Feel free to pause, have a go yourself. I'm assuming you've paused and you've unpaused now, so I'm going to start talking then. So immediately I need to think about, what do I know about the question topic? I need to think step 1, right? I know about the Treaty of Versailles. I know the aims of the peacemakers. I know who the peacemakers are. I know the terms of the treaty. I know the reactions from each country to the treaty. I know about the other treaties that took place. I know whether it's justified or not. I know all this information. What do I need to add to springboard off into here? Let's look at source B, the picture source first. What is it telling me about the Treaty of Versailles? So it's a cartoon published in an American newspaper in 1919, commenting on the Treaty of Versailles. The title of the cartoon is All That's Left is the 15th Point. And you can see we've got here Treaty of Peace that's been kind of destroyed. I can see this character on the left has got a dumbbell attached to his leg that indicates he's like a prisoner. And I can see a person named Foch, who I don't think we know, is holding a sword that is 15th point. So immediately, if I'm trying to understand this source, I'm going to assume the person on the left is Germany. I think this source is saying that Germany is being killed, imprisoned, locked up by this peace treaty. This peace treaty is hurting Germany. It's presenting this idea, but it's an idea that's coming from an American newspaper. American newspaper is obviously far away from Germany. It's not Germany being angry. It's a country that was a part of the Big Three that is saying that the Treaty of Versailles is bad. So it's giving us a part of their reactions. Now, if I was going to add my own historical knowledge to that source, immediately it says 15th point, which I think, to my own knowledge about Woodrow Wilson, he came to the Treaty of Versailles with 14 points for peace. And so we say all that's left is the 15th point is probably a play on those words. And the 15th point being on the sword indicates that the 15th point of peace is to kill Germany. And I think what they're doing is pointing out the hypocrisy of the Treaty of Versailles, where Woodrow Wilson was being all big about peace and that treaty being kind to Germany. But in reality, this treaty was very harsh on Germany. I know it's harsh on Germany because of these numbers of terms, like limiting the army to 100,000 men, like making them pay reparations of what, £6.6 billion, right? This is, you know, it's a harsh treaty, and it's saying that this is a hypocritical thing. And I know this could be applied as well, that we know that Americans do not ratify the Treaty of Versailles. We know that they dislike it from that fact. So this is backed up by my own knowledge here. Let's look at source C now as well. Adapted from a British newspaper article published in June 1919, the author was a war correspondent during the First World War and also attended the Paris Peace Conference. Okay, so this person was there when it was being made. The Treaty of Versailles is the result of 7 months' hard work by the Allies and is a great achievement. The German Empire, with its brutality and uncontrolled hunger for conquest, is at an end. The world now looks forward to the end of warfare itself. The treaty stands for civilization and is the greatest combined effort of goodwill and justice ever made. Well, obviously, this is very much in support of the Treaty of Versailles. It's showing us that, well, at least a British newspaper or a British person really feels like the Treaty of Versailles is going to bring peace to the world. It's really putting that idea forward, isn't it? And it is an absolute reaction to when it was created as well, as right at the time. So I immediately off the top of the bat, I'm trying to think of what knowledge I can present to that to really add on. And I'm thinking, well, I know that British people were in support of Germany being punished. I know that they were all singing Hang the Kaiser, and they've been led lots of things about the British press saying that Germany deserved punishment. And even Lloyd George was brought into the job to punish Germany. So a lot of British people thought it was firm but fair. So this is probably someone who's in that ball camp. Even though I know that Lloyd George maybe disagreed, what it's presented to me is that the people of England, or at least this British newspaper, is very much in support of the Treaty of Versailles because of those reasons that I've just said. Now, if I was to pick which one gives us a better opinion, one of them is really telling us that America dislikes the treaty. The other one is telling us that Britain liked the treaty, or should we say the people of Britain, the people of America. I think the more useful one is going to be source C, in my opinion, because I think I like that it's showing that they found the hypocrisy of Wilson, that they found Wilson to be hypocritical when he came in saying he was going to be peaceful and left having empowered Britain and France. That anger is really being shown here, because it's not just anger in the USA, but it's anger for or on behalf of Germany as well. Source B comes from a British newspaper that arguably, or the British country, gained a lot from the Treaty of Versailles, didn't they? They gained mandates and they were being paid their reparations back, and that might limit their ability to be critical of the treaty. They'd been hurt so much that they wanted it to be successful, and they believed it was right because of their feelings of justice. And I feel that maybe clouds the source C's idea of it being, you know, an actual critique of the treaty, more just like, I love it because it gains me stuff. That would be something I'd try to talk about in my conclusion, but nonetheless, a really good section of source to talk about. Let's look at a different set. This is about the League of Nations now. So our question now is, how useful are these two sources to someone studying the League of Nations? I apologize, my head's covering one of them, but I think you can know this source already if you've been in lessons for it. So pause here, have a go yourself, practice, have a go. All right, I'll pause for a second. Okay, I'm sure you've had a moment to pause. I've had a moment to pause. Let's get started and think these sources through. Source B, adapted from a recruitment pamphlet published by the League of Nations Union in 1925. The League of Nations Union was a British organisation formed in 1918 which promoted the ideals. So promoted means push them forward. The ideals being the ideas of the League of Nations. So they wanted peace and were pushing it. By the mid-1920s, it had over 250,000 supporters. So that's a lot of people that have joined this organisation. Like, it's hard to get anyone to join a school club, let alone 250,000 people to push for peace. The League has achieved so much in the last 4 years. It has prevented war between Sweden and Finland. It settled the disagreement over Upper Silesia and created an international health office. The League has not achieved more because it does not have, as yet, the support of the whole world. So this means there's a need to tell people about the League. Taxpayers, businessmen, ex-soldiers and women should all join our union to demand the prevention of future wars. Well, I love that source. There's so much to talk about there from your own knowledge as well. You could really demonstrate a lot of facts from you. But really what this is saying is this source is really in support of the League, isn't it? It's showing us that the League, or at least this group of people who supported the League of Nations, wanted the League to do more, and they felt that there was a weakness. The League was aware of its weaknesses here. So it mentions at the start these different successes of the League of Nations. If you remember our 1920s lesson about the League, you'll remember that the war between Sweden and Finland is a reference to the Åland Islands. That's a good knowledge for us. Upper Silesia, where they split that area of Poland to Germany and Poland. And the International Health Office is probably part of special commissions, improving social conditions around the world, which reduces war by making people happier, right? We know about that, and it's the League celebrating their successes here, ignoring their failures in Vilna. But on top of that, it's that the League, or people know the League is weak. I think that's the presentation here. It's telling us that the League's not achieved more because it doesn't have all of the world. We know that the League doesn't have all of the world. We know that Germany was not allowed to join. We know that Austria wasn't allowed to join. We know Russia wasn't allowed to join for a long time. So this has meant that there's been limitations on the League's ability, and they're asking people to support the League. What this is letting us know is that the League wants to do more, and it knows its problems inside of it. I think that's what we learned there. Let's look at source C. A cartoon published in Britain in 1932, so a very different time frame. The figure holding the gun is Japan, who's on trial in front of the League of Nations. Now, I'm blocking it over, but I think you know what this is saying. I think it's the quote is, the court orders Japan to go and have a stern talking to, and Japan says, I order the League of Nations to mind its own business or to chase itself, if I remember correctly. So, we are looking at this reference. Well, clearly what it's telling us is that the League of Nations is not strong, basically. It's telling us the League of Nations cannot effectively punish people. It's telling us that the League of Nations cannot punish Japan specifically for their actions. I know from my own knowledge that Japan, during the Manchurian crisis, invaded another country, and the League took over 6 months to reply, and Japan just left the League of Nations rather than suffering punishment. So the League couldn't effectively punish their own members, especially members of the council, right? We know this, and we can really pull our own knowledge in to explain what the source is saying, right? It's telling us the League cannot punish people. I know it can't punish people, frankly. They can only morally condemn or economically sanction or force to mitigate. It could not effectively do their punishments. Now we've got to make a decision which one gives us a more useful view of the League of Nations. This idea that the League knows its weaknesses and is trying to do better, or that by 1932 the League still couldn't do better. The one I'd pick is probably source C, mainly because of the time it's been presented. Source B, I would say, well, let's start with source C. Source C is more useful because it presents the more recent opinion of the League of Nations. The League of Nations has had a lot of time to attempt to solve world crises, and when presented with the Manchurian crisis, they have continued to fail. Their structure, their weaknesses in terms of their sanctions on countries has led them to fail and led to Japan getting away with an invasion and causing war and death, which is an absolute failure in their eyes. Source B, some might argue source B is useful though, because B presents this idea that the League is aware of their weaknesses, that they are wanting to make themselves better and aware of their weaknesses, specifically by adding more countries to the League. But I think this argument's limited because this is in 1925. But source C is in 1932, 7 years later, and the League is still continuing to fail to achieve. The League, even with maybe increased membership, and I know there is increased membership because I know Germany joins the Council in 1925, right? I know that even with increased membership, the League still can't solve world crises because of their structure, and that's more aptly presented in source C than it is done in source B, and that's why I would choose that one. Another really good set of sources, really good ones. So last one that I'm going to do for you, this one is about the road to war. To be honest, the question on the board is road to war, but actually this source is all about, this question, sorry, is how useful a source was B and C to someone studying appeasement, to a historian studying appeasement. Underneath my head is another famous source, but it's a picture of baby with a baby Hitler suckling a bottle with the word concessions written on it. So if you want to have a moment to pause, have a think, you can look up this source as well, but try and have a go on your own answer, okay? Look in, stop in, have a moment, off you go. Let's come back. So I'm going to go through these. Let's talk through what would we say we're learning about appeasement here. Source B, adapted from a statement issued by Neville Chamberlain and Adolf Hitler following the signing of the Munich Agreement in September 1938. So immediately I'm thinking about what I know about appeasement. I know this is a major example of appeasement, right? So let's look. We, the German Chancellor and British Prime Minister, have met again and agreed that the relationship between our countries is most important, both for ourselves and Europe. The Anglo-German Naval Agreement of 1935 and the successful Munich Conference show our country's desire to avoid war between us. We are determined that talking shall be the way of solving any issues concerning our two countries. So what this is saying, what it is presenting to us, is that Britain and France are on the same page, that Britain and France do not want to, should we say, go to war with each other. It's presenting the idea that these two are working together to continue peace after the Munich Conference. Now, the problem with this source is that a lot of people will start getting bogged down because they know it's a lie. They know that from their own knowledge that they know Hitler invades the rest of Czechoslovakia. They know that Hitler is not presenting the truth here, and that would be a really big bit to talk about in your own knowledge. But I think the way we need to see it is that it's presenting that two sides are saying the same thing, but for different reasons. So if we're to think about it from Hitler's side, he's presenting this idea that he wants peace here. He's saying that we're going to talk to solve issues in the future because it's an appeasement, taking advantage of appeasement. It's I'm going to say that I'm going to speak. I'm going to write my note on the piece of paper. I'm going to give Neville Chamberlain my autograph so that I can continue to do things unimpeded. Meanwhile, Chamberlain has a very different viewpoint. And he's saying that we're working towards peace because I do not want war again, because I want peace, because I don't want death, because we can't afford to go to war, because it's, if anything, saving more lives in the long run. That understanding would need to be demonstrated here to fully understand what source B is telling us. Now let's look at source C. A cartoon published in a widely read and respected American newspaper in 1938. So this is from America, who's now very much far away from our League of Nations, far, far away from our world politics in Europe, at least, or world developments, the lead up to World War II in Europe, basically. They're very far away from their understandings now. And they're going, shh, 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 he'll be quiet now, maybe. You can see Neville Chamberlain in Europe addressed as nurses or baby maids, and Hitler's being given concessions or given the bottle to quiet him from crying. Right? What this is saying, I need to think about that content for the message, is that it's very clear to American people just see all of these concessions towards Hitler as short term, giving the baby what's asked, the baby's going to continue crying, this kind of idea that appeasement is a poor plan and it makes them look weak. As sexist as it sounds, presenting Chamberlain in women's dress and presenting Chamberlain as a nursing maid is trying to make Chamberlain look bad. It's try to demasculate Chamberlain. So clearly they see him in a negative light. So we're learning that Americans are thinking of appeasement poorly. They don't think it's very good. And we know the reasons for it is that they're isolationist. They're watching this from the outside world. They are seeing that Hitler's getting away with stuff and there's no threat to war on them, so therefore they are not as worried about it. And all of this would come into your analysis of the two. But to make sure I've got my level 4 though, I need to think about the purpose, I need to think about both of them, which one is more useful to me. Well, the American newspaper definitely gives us a wider range of opinion, right? It gives us loads of people in America clearly see appeasement as weak, and that's a really useful idea of opinion because it comes from a newspaper that's widely read, like it says it in the provenance there. But if we look at source B gives us some very specific information about appeasement and how different people are using it. There's a very good way to argue both sides. Personally, I'd personally choose source B. It gives us two very clear different opinions on appeasement that are right next to each other, basically. We are seeing what Britain want from it, and we're also seeing what Germany is willing to do to continue appeasement as well, which could lead into how why they go for the Nazi-Soviet pact. It's to try and force appeasement rather than the ultimatum later on, but we might be getting off question at that point. Those are my model answers, right? You've heard me go through the questions 3 times. I'm just going to leave you with one. So here on my board is the final question, right? I'll read it to you. It's one that I'm not going to model answer for you. I urge you, if there's any of the questions you've tried today, this is the one you try the hardest on. This is the one you do on your own, right? Study source B and C. How useful are B and C to historians studying the causes of the Second World War? This is a 12-mark question. You've got source B and C on the board. I'll leave you to get on with it. Okay, good revising. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found it useful. Again, email with any issues and talk to us in school. Thank you very much. Goodbye.